Let us begin. Week number 6 on our modern church history. And this is where we left off last week in the late 20th century. So, we talked about Chinese Cultural Revolution, which actually caused to kick out Hudson Taylor and the China Inland Mission. And then we have 1968 Medellin Conference that advances liberal theology. So the rise of liberal theology against conservative or fundamental belief, Christian Protestant theology. Now we call that in general evangelical theology. It became a threat within the church itself. So when the enemy rises from within, that is even more dangerous than enemy from outside. And this is what had happened. Basically, liberal theology or liberation theology, that's two different things. Liberal theology is basically the theology that says the authenticity and the authority of the Bible is not like what we used to know and believe. They believe much part of especially the gospel, the New Testament has been redacted, meaning it's been edited to flavor, to support what disciples wanted to believe. And so it became more like a myth and mystical writing than originally was. So that's basically the idea of liberal theology. And then liberation theology is a very political theology, that Jesus was the deliberator, meaning he's the one who led this socio-political revolution against existing power that is corrupted and evil. So that's basic idea of liberation theology, and still prevails some part of Latin America. And with that liberation theology, I mean that they were able to convince the Catholic congregation and members to participate in a political uprising against the government and state in the name of religion as well. So that's what the liberation theology did, and its effect is still ongoing and much part of South America. And then 1974 is a very important year for us evangelicals with the Lordland Congress on world evangelization, and then they produced what we call Lordland Covenant, which lays a foundation for the more of evangelical theology, where in writing of this Lordland Covenant, well-known and famous John Stott and Billy Graham are one of the major participants in making of this Lordland Covenant. And it is a must material that we need to read even in today's Christian understanding about Christian theology, and especially the mission, because they use the word, instead of missions, they use the wording world evangelization or global evangelization, which covers the idea where the Jesus commanded us to go into all the nations and make disciples and teach them what Jesus had taught until the end of the earth, to the end of the earth until that Jesus comes back. So there are two important measurements given by Jesus. One is to the end of the time, which we do not know when, but to the end of the earth, that we do know where the end of the earth is. Well, there are several different interpretations regarding that phrase, the end of the earth, but the end is where the gospel is not present, or when we say gospel is not present, meaning there's no zero Christians in that particular domain. So whether it's a small village in Africa, or it's a big city in Middle East, in Islam countries, these are the end of the earth. So we need to have at least one Christian present in the given domain and area, whether it's a village or a city. So that has not been done yet, but we are sure that now it's pretty much almost close to the end time, because every corner of the earth now we are able to reach with all this smart electronic device. We know that even in remotest part of the earth, like a corner small village in Africa, or in Amazon, in Brazil, they do have the device. So now it is possible to reach every corner of the earth with the language of their own. Meaning, because of development of AI, artificial intelligence, now we are able to translate the Bible with a certain language within 2 or 3 years, even shorter than that. So that means every language that exists on earth, now the Wycliffe and all these Bible translation mission agencies will utilize this AI technology and use that to translate into the Bible, original language, Hebrew and Greek Bible, into their language very soon enough, which used to take 30, 40 years of work to be able to translate. So going back to the term world evangelization, it means that every corner of the world we need to have presence of the gospel and the Christians there. So the kingdom of God will be prevailing over whole surface of earth. That's what we are looking at. So in 1974, they make this very firm commitment and commitment to and toward the world evangelization with biblical gospel, biblical Christianity, against those who say, well, liberation, liberal theology says whatever they are believing in, it all comes down to the top of the mountain. So whether it's a Christianity, whether it's a Buddhism, whether it's a Islam, it's going to end up on the top of the mountain. That's kind of a theology or doctrine they have, the liberal theology. And we evangelicals says, no, there's only one way toward the top. These Buddhism and Islam may reach about 100 meters under the top of the mountain, that means they haven't reached the mountain, the truth. So even if it's 110 meters away from the top, it's not complete truth. Only the Bible, Christianity, Jesus Christ reaches very top, and that's the true religion and true truth. So that's our position as evangelicals. And this 1974 Lordland Congress makes sure that that is our theology. So Jesus Christ is the only one. He's the one that we worship and that we obey. Going into 1979, John Paul is first visit to Poland. Then 1985, says Gorbachev, General Secretary of Soviet Communist Party. He is the one who begins the collapse of Soviet Union. So with that, the wall of Germany, that has been also collapsed. I mean, it doesn't say here, but all that those developments are related. So by the end of the late 20th century, much development in global Christianity and global general history, secular history. Implications. Rise of civil rights movement, especially by the Martin Luther King and so on. Rise of non-Western global power, such as, well, that non-Western global power that begin to rise during this period will be mainly China. So China, Japan, and Korea were not political or diplomatically global power, but as the economy grows in these three major countries plus Taiwan, this region, what we call East Asia or the Far East Asia, becomes one of the strategically important and critical part of the global power. And that's early development. Now we, in 21st century, now 2026, we see instead of Russia is no longer the second most powerful nation or country, but China becomes the second powerful country in the global power. So that dynamic has changed quite a lot. And the only probably the problem that we may see in the future is when China and Russia kind of goes together as a military power and try to have this conflict against so-called Western power like NATO, America, then we'll have big issues. And we see that's beginning to happening, especially since the Iran-Israel-US war that is still going on. And then another implication, counter-liberal movement. So the liberal theology, it begins to rise pretty fast and it becomes pretty popular among those so-called liberal Christians, plus even non-believers who are atheists joins this liberal theology movement, because what they say is pretty much entertaining to these atheists. So that's kind of the thing that we saw in the late 20th century. Rise of Latin American Protestant, which began in the early 80s. Now we see the churches in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Central American countries growing really, really fast. So that's a new kind of development that we see in the evangelical scene. And the majority of the churches in this Latin America, like I said, is evangelical, but it falls into the category of what we call charismatic movement, like a Pentecostal churches. So that's something that we see today. And like I said, it has to do with the kind of people that they present. I mean, Latin Americans are very dynamic, should I say. And it matches with the charismatic movement and the charismatic trends of Christianity. End of 20th century. Now we are coming pretty close to the current modern days. Fall of Berlin Wall in 1989, and also Tiananmen massacre, which could have been, I think, could have been a very turning point in Chinese history. I mean, at least the modern Chinese history. That's a failed civil movement in China. Same as happened in Korea in 1980, year 1980. There's a Gwangju revolt, and then it was put down by the government, just as same as it happened in China as well. So it's like 9 years later in China, pretty similar thing happened. In 1991, fall of Soviet Union eventually, which the movement begun by the Gorbachev. Now it kind of ends with the fall of Soviet Union, which gives a very dramatic and drastic change in the map, in especially the Eastern Europe. Okay, 1997 handover of Hong Kong is also related to China, and so the Hong Kong becomes the district of the Democratic Republic of China. Then year 2000, decrease of urban participants. If you're familiar with evangelical Christianity, this Urbana Conference has been, since 1974 Lordland Covenant, has been one of the major mission conference in North America. I've been there like 3 times, Urbana Conference, and I could have witnessed. I was there in 1993, and then I believe 1997, and then year almost 2000, I think. So 3 times I've been there and literally watched the decrease in number of participants, especially the Korean Americans, Christians. In 1997, when I attended, it was like 2,000 plus Korean Americans there, out of 12,000. So it's almost 20%, at least 15% of participants were Korean Americans. And then in year 2000, it became like several hundred. So that's pretty much rapid decrease of participants in also not only Korean Americans, but the whole total number, because they kind of changed. I mean, they no longer able to use the urban campus of the University of Illinois. So they use some other facilities which kind of impacted the conference itself. Anyway, with all the reasons, what it shows is that the decrease of this zeal, and then motivation and need for the overseas missions. So that's a very significant number that we see. So that had happened. In 2009, first non-white president of U.S. Okay, President Obama. Okay, let's see. Yeah. So that's kind of a short, brief look at the history, both in secular and Christian church. Now we want to begin with the topic number 1. So we are going to investigate the church and churches. So to discuss the church history, we need to kind of have a brief idea about church. I'm going to go fast on this. The church, a church, and churches. When we speak of church, actually we are speaking of 3 different things, least. Number 1, church with a capital C, the church. Like I explained in other classes, the church with a C is the ultimate church. All the believers since and before Jesus Christ, including those believers, sincere believers, devoted believers who are considered the children of God or the saints in another name. These are the whole gathering of the saints or the believers from the beginning to the end. So that's the church. And we call this in theology either universal church or church Catholic. Not the Roman Catholic Church, but church Catholic. When you hear the church Catholic, not Catholic Church, a church Catholic means it's a universal church which is invisible as a concept, but it is real. Really existing church. But it's beyond the time and space. So that's a church with a big C there, the church. A church with a big C again, not small c, but big C. That's what we call the church in a given time and space. So let's say the Chinese church in 2026, May, today is, what's the date? May 12, okay. So at this particular moment and the time and in the land of China, and then all the Chinese Christians beyond the Chinese boundary, they are a church with a big capital C. So you can say at the Chinese church, meaning current all Chinese believers globally, especially in the land of China. So that's sort of a church. And then churches with the small c actually, or when you have the s's at the end, that means local congregations. So these local congregations, or we also call a shadow church, meaning it's not the true church, because when you look at a local congregation, any local church that we attend, we know there are true Christians and not so true Christians, or the ones who are coming to church to wanting to become a Christian. So local church has all these members who are believers and non-believers. So that's why we call it a shadow church, not the true church. So that's a local church is. So when we are speaking of church history, we are dealing with the church, the churches and the church, a church that is within the time and space. So within the time and space, meaning it is limited, it is not perfect, it will have issues and problems. So as we study the church history, we will come across all these issues and problems that we are going to encounter. So that's natural. And as we study church history, we realize that all this church history is never been perfect, never been always good, and there's ups and downs, and positive and negatives. So that's kind of nature of church history. So we'll not ask why, if it's a church of God, and Church of Jesus Christ, why are we having all these issues and problems? Yes, we do have all issues and problems because it's not perfect. And it has never been, and it is not today, and it will never be perfect until Jesus comes back and make it perfect. So that's how we understand the church. And the second point there, church as a divine entity, the ideology. So when we speak of church again, it has to be perfect. It has to be, because church is, the Bible says the head of church is Jesus Christ, and we are the body. So if that is the case, then it's a divine entity. It is run by the Holy Spirit, and Jesus is the head. So the body, if Jesus is perfect, then body should be perfect and complete. But the Bible also describes and sees a church as a growing organism, meaning it's like a baby that matures and grows and continues to grow to become an adult. So that would be the reality, while the ideal is to reach that perfect maturity as Jesus is. So in between these two, reality and ideality, there is a conflict, there's a dilemma, there are paradoxes, there are issues and problems. And as we study the modern church history, or any history for the matter, we are looking at these issues and problems, and we are seeing why did that happen, how did it happen, and what are the principles that we can draw, and what are the messages and the learnings that we can draw from these things that had happened in the past. And by learning them with the lessons and the message and the principles that we draw, we're going to apply that to today's world, and since we are speaking of church, today's church, and try to improve and make it better, and try not to make the same mistake that they had made in the past. So that's why we do study this history diligently and with the reason and purpose. So if you do any historical study without this reason and purpose, then you're just trying to memorize the chronology and just gain the knowledge. We are not trying to gain the knowledge, we're trying to gain the message. So that would be the key difference between true historian and then those who just study history for whatever the reason. So church as a human institution, that is a reality, while church is at the same time a divine entity. So there is that dilemma and kind of tension, that's the word. So there is that tension between these two reality which we see every day, even today. Okay, we begin with the early ecclesiological development, meaning when you say ecclesio, it means church. So ECC or EKK, LES, ecclesia, ecclesio, it all has to do with the church, because the Greek word for church is ekklesia, meaning called out of. So that's the Greek word borrowed and used in the academic discussion and term. Shift one, European church to American church. That's in the modern church history, not in the early church history. So this early meaning only in a modern church, modern history. So in 19th century, 19th century, we see the shift from European church to American church, which had begun as many Europeans immigrate to United States and then also Canada for the new frontier or new, what was the nation? Sort of new world. Yeah, that's the word. New world. So when Europeans, especially the English and then the Dutches, when they begin to speak the new word, that meant America, and the land of America, which is both Canada and the USA now. So as these people, especially those Puritans and the Baptists, move from the European land to America, the center of Christianity, especially the Protestant Christianity, is moving from Europe to America. Now the question for today for us is where this now the shift is going to or toward, from American church to where? Some say it's a South American church, or some say it's a African church, because both Africa and South America, the church is exploding, meaning it is experiencing very fast growth from the late 20th century to now 21st century. What we say that the wind of Holy Spirit, that kind of moves church from the continent to continent. We have seen that in the past history, church history, and we still seeing and witnessing that happening. So some say it's going to be the Latin American church, or some say it's the African church, and some would say it's Asian church. See, number-wise, as we don't have exact numbers, but they say there are 100 million Christians and plus, more than 100 million Christians in mainland China. And unfortunately, we have no way to verify exact number of Chinese believers in the mainland, but I think it's pretty much the correct number, 100 million, which would count at least 6-7% of the whole population, right? And the number of missionaries that are sent today and overseas, according to some report that I read, the number one country that send the most missionaries to overseas is China, or Chinese church. So it is possible, but since we don't have that, official numbers, because you cannot produce that in China, so we are not sure. But if that is the case, let's say, if that is true, then the wind of Holy Spirit is moving from American church to churches in East Asia, including Korea. So Korea and China would be one of the major next century forces for this paradigm shift. I'm just kind of speculating it, and I don't have any solid, congruent evidence for it, but that's how I feel. Next shift, expansion of the Protestant churches. That doesn't happen. It's not happening in South Korea. In South Korea, for now, the Catholic Church is growing faster than the Protestant Church. But in other areas, all the Protestant churches, usually most of the time, is outgrowing the Catholic churches. So it's a shift, and it's a major trend that we see in the global movement of church growth. Then another shift that we need to focus on is global mission and global churches. The reason that we use global church is not like in the past. Global church meant the churches, each church that is existing in the every nation, and we kind of conceptualize all these national churches together and say global churches. Now it's not the same, because the people are traveling a lot more than we used to, and there's a last century alone, 20th century alone, and especially by the end of the 20th century, in 1990 to 2010, there are at least 300 million immigrants that are moving out of his or her own country and then going into another country to live. So that's another trend. And also the development and this development of internet and plus AI now, it increases and it breaks all this national identity and national wall that has been very high. Now it's coming down and pretty low. So when we are speaking of global churches, it's a different kind of church that we are speaking of. It's not the grouping of small or each national churches, but without that wall, it's a global churches. Okay, let's take 10 minutes break. This is our second hour and week number 6 on modern church history. And we are speaking of this shift. And there are these major shifts that happened, like we just looked at, reviewed a very short chronology of church history. And there are these moments where the history changes from A to A. Sometimes it's very drastic within days or weeks. Sometimes it takes months or years. But certainly there are these trends, what we call shift, and usually resulting a paradigm shift. Paradigm shift is again, it's a way of thinking, how people perceive and how people interpret the reality. So we continue to do that as a human being, individually, sometimes as a whole ethnic group, and whatever the case is, that we continue to interpret and respond to the reality, and sometimes your perspective, your perception changes from A to B. Sometimes little, but many times very big shift, what we can call a shift. So that is a form of change, and the shift, since it's a drastic change, it does bring the drastic consequence and result from that change. Two, all the ecclesiological development, new trend. So these are some of the new trends that we see in the 20th and then 21st century today. Denominationalism, which actually goes back to the 19th century. So it's not something that happened in 20th century, but in beginning with the 19th century, and within the Protestant, the Protestant itself, Protestants are the one who divide itself from the Catholic churches, but now within that Protestant churches, there are divisions usually due to theological and doctrinal differences. Usually it's not major. If it's a major difference, you might become a high heresy, but these are the minor things. For example, are you going to baptize baby or not? And most Presbyterian churches do allow infant baptism, but the Baptist churches, most conservative Baptist churches, they do not have this baby infant baptism, but instead we have what we call baby dedication. So that's totally two different things. Some churches allow congregation to have communion whether they are believers or not. And many churches, evangelical churches, do not permit or allow or ask the congregation, if you're not a born-again true believer, just pass the elements. So that's sort of a difference. And another reason for having the denomination in the modern church history is because of the way they structure their church. So the power arrangement and also decision making in a church is different from A denomination to B denomination. For example, Methodists, they would have the top, who is called, what's the name? Overseer. And this overseer takes the care of several different regional leaders. And then these regional leaders will be responsible for the pastors in that area. So it's kind of structure the Methodists have. And the difference between a Methodist and Presbyterian, even though Presbyterian does have the similar structure, these the leaders of each region would not have the power to oversee or control the churches under. They do not have power to move one pastor to another church, but the Methodist does have power. The overseer, he has the power, or she has the power to move one pastor to another church and so on. So that's kind of difference. On the contrary, the Baptist, for example, especially the Southern Baptist, since I'm familiar with the Southern Baptist, each church is individually run. It has its own power to set the personnel and the money, finance, and the politics. It's all individual churches. So each church has its own rights. And then they congregate as a convention rather than denomination. So convention is a gathering of each individual churches for the reason of reaffirming their confession and belief and doctrine. So these are some of the reasons that we have denominations or divisions. Sometimes these divisions are sour and with the fight. Sometimes it's peaceful and just signing the paper. You and I do not agree on certain things, so we're going to separate and build another group. That's very peaceful way. But many times they fight over these stuff and get divided. So whichever the case, this rise of denominationalism, it contributes, ironically, because of many denominations, the church has been expanded. That's kind of ironic, because they fight, they separate, and they build their own churches, and because of that, church expand. And this is not anything new, because we see the same thing happening in the Acts of Apostles. If we read the Acts of Apostles, we see the same thing happening there. So that's nothing new. Fight and divide and grow. That's one of the ways that the church expands. Hierarchic order to team order. This will be a very significant change in the modern church history. Many churches today, especially us Asian churches or Asian American churches, when we immigrate to America, it is different paradigm. In the countries that we were, Japan, China, Korea, it's very hierarchy. You have head and then sub-head and then so on, and many ranks. And each exercise their own power and authority. When we come to America, we see much less hierarchy, 2 or 3 at the most, especially in church. And they do not exercise down to, like a downward hierarchy, but they do communicate up and down, and you can say whatever you want to the top leaders, and they will listen and so on. So that's quite different. So we see that and try to change and modify. One thing that is, significant in, for example, Korean American churches. The first generation Korean American believers, including pastors, they are very used to that, hierarchic structure. Now, the second or 1.5 generation Korean Americans, they are very used to this horizontal structure and less hierarchy, because they were educated in American school system, and their thoughts and mind are very Americanized. We say ABC, right, in Chinese culture, American-born Chinese. So these ABCs are pretty different from those who are from China. And so that kind of cultural difference and gap we experience, and that sometimes create conflict. I'm sure the same thing happened in Chinese churches. But China has a longer history, immigrant history than Korean Americans. So I think you guys experienced in early in church history. But in Korean American churches, it happened like 20 years ago, very serious conflict. And those English-speaking Korean Americans separated themselves from the first generation church and established their own church. So I think it's happening to all the first and the second generation together churches. As we see that, because of the mindset and the thought and the culture can affect how church is organized, and even how church is functioning, and even how church is worshiping. So the English-speaking congregation, Korean Americans, worship very different style than the first generation. So as we see these things, this is not only happening in America, but it's a global trend. Because globally, we see the rise of democratic mindset. And it wasn't like that. You could have maintained that hierarchic culture and thoughts generation after generation. But until we have this internet and YouTube, that they can, as long as they have free access to the internet, not like in North Korea, then you'll see and you'll learn. And for the younger generation, it's a much better idea that everyone is the same and horizontal. You can say your opinion and freely and loudly, and you will not be punished for saying that. So it becomes like a global trend and culture, and it does come into the church as well. So now the church is more like a team-oriented, horizontal structure than it used to be. So what that means is the older generation may lose their voice. It is both good and bad, right? Always these things. It is good because you're not getting unnecessary comments or the interruption from the older generation. But at the same time, you are missing the wisdom and experience from the older generation. So it always works both ways. And the best for us today is to have unnecessary interruptions and interventions, take them away while translate and transfer all that good wisdom to the next generation. So that's what we need to do as in the in-between middle generation. So if we are successful, the church is going to grow healthy. But if we don't, then we see the very bitter separation, which happened a lot in Korean American churches that I know of. And I myself had experienced a lot of those, because I'm like a 1.5 in between, and then I many times don't understand why and how this first generation leaders do the ways they do it. And so I know this very well. Similar thing, authoritarian to autonomy. Autonomy is it's a very powerful thing, because you are generating this the initiation or the willingness from within yourself. But us who grow up in the Asian culture, you are told to do certain things, and that's how it should work. Is the authority tells you to do this, and you do that. And they tell you not to do this, and you don't do that. If you're going against it, then you're out of the culture. You're someone like ugly duckling. That's how Americans say. So you're odd kind of person. You don't belong to the society and culture. But that does not produce willingness from within the culture itself. And if the church is the same, then we have problem. But the church is the same, used to be. Now, this new generation in the 21st century, they want to be everything to be autonomic, meaning if I don't like it, I don't do it. If I don't want it, I don't do it, and it's okay. It wasn't used to be okay. It would be a big problem. But for this MZ generation or new generation, they, whatever, I mean, you tell me, I don't listen, and that is okay. And so that's kind of mentality. But I see this autonomy is the most powerful thing for any Christian works, Christian endeavor, discipleship, and the church attending, everything. So I'm on that side, autonomy side, than authoritarian. But many first generation leaders, pastors, they are still authoritarian. I mean, especially speaking of Asian American churches. Next, congregationalism. I'm not so familiar with that, so I'll just skip that one. Newer trend, continuing, Presbyterianism. So that's, again, a denominational thing. Okay, going back to congregationalism. That's basically the Baptists are the idea of Baptist organization of individual churches. Each congregation, each local churches has its own power to decide its own fate. So that's what the major idea of congregationalism. So each congregation is separate. They have their own power to decide what to do with their own churches. Presbyterianism is the idea of representative politics, meaning you choose a certain representative and you do the election for your own representative, and they come up to the higher level and gather together and make a decision. That's what the Chinese Communist Party are doing. I mean, when President Xi, when he gathers a representative from all over the China, they gather together and do this massive, how to say, we call it 대회. It's a great gathering, and then make all these important decisions every year, then every 5 years. So that's sort of a similar picture. So it is important to choose right presbytery, meaning usually in a Presbyterian church, presbyters are the elders. Elders, they are the again presbyteries, and they gather sometimes monthly, and then make decisions for the church. So who choose these elders? Of course, the congregation do make an election and choose the presbytery, and they form a presbytery, and then they make a decision. So it's again representative politics. So you choose your representative, and they make the decision. Same thing in the USA president election is also that style. They choose the delegate, and these delegate go and make a final decision and who to choose. Usually, delegates are the members of the party. So if you have more Republican Party, then Republicans usually win. The Republican president candidate will win, and then other way, vice versa. Then regional dominion. I'll skip that. Bishops and synod. That's again, that's a Methodist. They have a bishop and synod, and it's an area by area regional politics. And then what's different is each individual local churches belong to certain synod, and the bishops are the top leader who's making decisions, especially the personal decisions. I mean, personal resources. They relocate them, and that's how the system works. Brethren tradition. I'm not so familiar with the brethren tradition, and one thing that I know, and I had experienced the brethren tradition myself, because while I was in Africa, that the church that I attended a couple of times were brethren, and then what they do, they come on Sunday, and there's no pastor actually. So one of them, led by Holy Spirit, comes to the pulpit in front and begin to preach. So each Sunday, you do not know who's going to preach and on what passage and so on. And so that's one thing that I saw, so that I can speak of. So the leadership style is pretty different. And actually, that is a leadership style that we see in the New Testament, the Acts. And they say that's how the early church has done it, so we do still keep that. And so that's brethren tradition. So these are some of the development that mainly happen in America. So when we are talking of modern church history, if you're not speaking European churches, because European churches, it died very gradually during this modern church history, and the rise of American churches. So when we speak of modern church history, it's mainly North American churches that we are talking of. And all these things did happen mainly in America, not all, but mainly majority of the things that we are seeing, the new trend, that happened in American church. Third, early ecclesiological development, new churches. Pentecostal churches and charismatic churches. Like I said, especially in Latin America, these Pentecostal and charismatic movement, or the churches, become the major trend. While the Baptist and Presbyterian and Methodist were the major church trend in North America. if you compare this trend, one is the word or Bible centered, meaning they do focus on the reading and studying of the Word of God and preaching it from the Bible. On the other hand, this charismatic and Pentecostal movement are more focused more on prayers and then very dynamic worship. So that kind of, it separates two trends. But on the bottom of this is is a word or prayer. So which is better? Can tell. Both are good. I mean, you want to balance the word, study of word, and then the prayer, or the thinking and the feeling, balanced. But in reality, individually and as a group, you kind of fall into, inclined to this or that. So as something that you cannot avoid, there's no perfect balance. So you kind of go either way, because that's how God had built us individuals. You're either thinking person or a feeling person. You cannot be both balanced thinking and feeling. It's rare. It's not impossible, but it's rare. Next, ethnic churches and national churches. Like I said before, the development that happened, the trend of having the independence, political independence from the colonial European powers, majority of those African countries and Latin American countries, they now begin to see themselves as an independent ethnic or national identity or entity. So having that entity, it relates to their identity, and they realize who they are, and that begins, or that gives the new identity to their churches. So usually these churches in Latin America and Africa were helped and financed and ran by these colonial leaders, even in the church. So white pastors preach in black African church. They're usually the case. And even if the African black pastors are preaching in African churches, they were not financially independent or politically independent, meaning for example, churches in English colonies are strongly associated with Anglican Church. And those Dutch churches, same thing. So these, visibly and invisibly, these churches that were in the colonial nations, they are under, it is literally under the authority of this colonial church. And as politically they are liberated, church begin to see. But it took a longer time than the political, because it's a church. Because it's a church, you don't kick out the white pastor because he's white. It doesn't happen that way, especially like South African churches in South Africa. Majority of the churches pastors were white. So it went on, but eventually they tried to have, and there's a very strong trend and effort to have their own church without the intervention or the support of outside churches or non-national churches. So that's kind of trend we saw in this modern church history, and we'll continue to discuss that. And I'll see you guys next week. Okay, thank you. Have a good week, and see you.
You too. I've been to 3 churches in America, one in Florida and 2 in California. But I think the Chinese church are all first-generation church. I have never been to a second-generation church. I think the second generation, they go to the Western church.
They do?
I don't know of any, like, all the American-born Chinese church. But I don't know, but I just assume.
Wow.
But the Koreans, they have the second generation church.
We have many.
Oh, okay. Most of the churches here are set up by the Taiwanese. By Taiwanese.
Taiwanese churches.
But there's 3 old Taiwanese church I've been to. Mandarin church.
Okay. So
But because I've seen some, I joined some, participated some programs, activities from the Western church for the Chinese students, UCR, and they have some helpers from their church, and those Chinese are the second generation church. So I don't know, but I think it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's different.
I think Chinese people are more want to join the Western.
Adaptive.
Yeah. Bye bye, teacher.
Yep.
Bye bye. Thank you. See you next week.
See you next week.